In 2019, on the steppes of southern Russia, archaeologists made a discovery that would rewrite history. A discovery so profound, so unexpected, that it would force us to question everything we thought we knew about ancient civilization. What they found would prove that the legends were not legends at all. For over 2,000 years, the ancient Greeks told stories of fierce warrior women. They called them the Amazons, fearless, merciless, undefeated in battle. But scholars dismiss these tales as myth, pure fiction, male fantasy born from Greek imagination. The scholars were wrong. In 2019, a tomb was uncovered in Western Russia. Not just any tomb, a royal burial mound from the 4th century BC. And inside, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary. 4 skeletons, 4 women, buried together, arranged with ritual precision, and buried with them an arsenal of weapons. But the real shock came when they analyzed the remains. DNA analysis revealed something that challenged everything historians believed. These were not isolated warrior women. These were 3 generations of female warriors. A grandmother, a mother, a daughter, all buried with weapons. All are showing signs of combat. All proving that warrior women weren't just legend, they were legacy. Today we follow Dr. Mikhail Petrov, one of the lead archaeologists on this groundbreaking discovery, as he holds one of the most important artifacts ever unearthed, a weapon that once belonged to a Scythian warrior woman 2,500 years ago. When you hold an artifact like this, you're not just holding metal and bone, you're holding a story, a life, a woman who walked these very plains 2,500 years ago. I wonder, what was she like? Who was she? What did she fight for? Let us journey back in time to an age before empires, before conquest, to the wild steppes of ancient Scythia, where a different kind of warrior emerged. 2,500 years before our world, the Scythian steppes, a land of endless grass, wild horses, and nomadic tribes. In this harsh, untamed world, a girl was born. Her name was Cyana, born into the family of the Sauromatai, a Scythian tribe, where the traditions were different, where women were not confined to domestic life, where women were warriors. Even as a child, Cyana was different. While other children played, she trained. While others watched from the sidelines, she rode. While others dreamed of peace, she lived for battle. The Scythian people were different from the Greeks, the Persians, and the Egyptians. In Scythian culture, women were not property. They were not decorative. They were equals. They fought alongside men. They hunted alongside men. They ruled alongside men. And in the family of warriors, women could become legends. By her late teens, Cyana had become one of the finest warriors the tribe had ever seen. Her archery was legendary. She could hit a moving target from a galloping horse with impossible precision. Her spear work was devastating. Her courage, unquestionable. And then came the battle that would define her legacy. The Battle of the Steppe, an attack by rival tribes seeking to claim Scythian territory. Cyana and her fellow warriors rode out to meet them. In that battle, she took an arrow to the shoulder. She fell from her horse. She rose again, sword in hand, and continued fighting. She sustained wounds that would have killed a lesser warrior, yet she persisted. That day, Cyana's tribe prevailed, but Cyana paid a price. The arrow wound became infected. Despite her warrior strength, despite her will to survive, her body could not recover. As her death approached, her family prepared her for the next world. Not as a domestic woman, but as what she was, a warrior. They gathered her weapons. They placed them in a tomb designed for a queen. They marked her grave with a great mound of earth so that all who passed would know, here lies a warrior. Cyana's story seemed to end there, but it was only the beginning, because around her grave, over generations, others were buried. Her daughter, her daughter's daughter. Each is a warrior. Each was buried with weapons, each proving that this was not an accident or anomaly. This was culture. This was legacy. This was a society. 3 generations of warrior women, buried together, buried with honor, buried with the respect reserved for kings and queens. And yet, for 2,500 years, their story was forgotten, dismissed as myth, until archaeologists finally found them. When we find these artifacts, when we examine the DNA, when we see the evidence of healed combat wounds on female skeletons, we're not just looking at objects, we're looking at proof that an entire society of fierce, independent, extraordinary women existed. And if the Greeks knew about them, if they told stories about them, then perhaps the Amazons were not myth at all. They were history. The evidence is overwhelming. In tombs across the Scythian steppes, archaeologists have found graves containing approximately 1/3 of all female skeletons buried with weapons. This is not an anomaly. This is a pattern. This is proof. DNA analysis confirms that these women warriors belonged to the same families. They were related. They inherited their status. They trained their daughters to be warriors, just as they themselves had been trained. Some of their bones show healed fractures consistent with combat. Some show arrow wounds. Some show evidence of being struck by blunt force weapons. These were not ceremonial warriors playing at battle. These were real warriors who survived real combat. What fascinates me most is the weapons, the quality, the care taken. These were not crude tools. These were crafted by master artisans. Spear points are perfectly balanced. Bows made from the finest materials. Arrows with precision fletching. This tells us these women had access to the best weapons. They were valued enough that their society invested in their equipment. They were not footnotes in history. They were central to Scythian civilization. The ancient Greeks knew about these warrior women. The historian Herodotus wrote extensively about them. He called them by a name that would echo through history, the Amazons. Herodotus described how the Scythian warrior women were not inferior in courage to the men. He told of their skill with bow and spear. He described how they lived and fought as equals to their male counterparts. For centuries, historians dismissed Herodotus as a storyteller, not a historian. They believed he had embellished, exaggerated, created myths. But Herodotus was telling us the truth. The physical evidence now proves it. The Greeks were fascinated by these women. They created stories about them. They painted them on pottery. They sculpted them. But the fascination came from reality. The Amazons were not pure fiction. They were inspired by real warrior women that the Greeks had encountered around the 7th century BC, or perhaps earlier. When Greek armies clashed with Scythian warriors, they faced women who fought with equal skill and ferocity as men. It was shocking to them. It was revolutionary, and it inspired legends. The Greek myths about individual Amazon queens, Hippolyta, Penthesilea, Antiope, were likely inspired by real Scythian female leaders. The DNA evidence shows that women in Scythian society could achieve high status. Some were buried with gold crowns. Some were clearly honored with elaborate funeral rituals. These were not mythical beings. These were real women who held power, who led the warriors, who commanded respect. One of the most famous Greek myths involves Hercules' quest to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, the Amazon queen. For centuries, this was seen as pure mythology. But what if this myth had roots in real trade, real diplomacy, real encounters between Greek and Scythian peoples? Scythians and Greeks traded. They encountered each other. They fought and sometimes allied. The stories of the Amazons would have traveled along these same trade routes, and as stories do, they transformed. They became mythologized. They became legends. But the core of truth remained. Women warriors existed. They were formidable. They were real. To understand the Scythian warrior women, we must understand the Scythian way of life. The Scythians were nomads. They did not build permanent cities or stay in one place. They moved across vast steppes with their herds, their families, their possessions. This nomadic lifestyle was fundamentally different from settled civilizations like Greece or Egypt. In nomadic tribes, everyone had to be capable and strong. There was no luxury of having half the population unable to defend themselves or contribute to survival. Men hunted, women hunted, men fought, women fought, men led, women led. This was not ideology. This was a necessity. Scythian women were expert horsewomen. They spent their entire lives on horseback. They could shoot with deadly accuracy from a moving horse. They could manage a spear from a gallop. They were as comfortable in the saddle as they were on the ground. The weapons we find in female warrior tombs are identical in quality to those found in male warrior tombs. This tells us something crucial. Women and men were trained with equal rigor. They had equal access to the best equipment. They were treated as equals in the warrior culture. We also have evidence that Scythian warrior women, like men, were tattooed. Tattoo kits have been discovered in Scythian burials, including female burials. These tattoos likely indicated status, family lineage, and victories in battle. They were not simply decorated, they were marked as warriors, visibly and permanently. A Scythian warrior woman was immediately recognizable. Tattooed, armed, muscular from a lifetime of riding and combat. She would have been intimidating, she would have been impressive, and she would have been feared by anyone who faced her in battle. What made Scythian culture unique was not just that women could fight, it was that they could lead, they could own property, they could participate in governance, they could command respect and authority. In a word, they had autonomy. This was revolutionary. In most ancient civilizations, women were property. In Scythia, women were people, full people with agency, authority, and the right to determine their own lives. There is one Amazon myth that deserves special attention because it reveals so much about how myths can distort reality. The Greeks claimed that Amazons removed one breast to improve their archery. They even said this is where the name Amazon comes from, a meaning without, and meson meaning breast. But here is the truth. There is no archaeological evidence of this practice. Not a single female skeleton shows evidence of surgical breast removal. Not one. This is pure myth, created by the Greek imagination. So, how did this myth arise? Scholars believe the answer is simpler. When Greek artists depicted Scythian warrior women, they often showed them with armor covering their chests. The armor would hide or minimize the appearance of breasts. Greek male artists, interpreting what they saw, created a myth to explain it. The women must have removed their breasts to be better warriors. It was not malice, it was not deception, it was simply a misunderstanding. The human mind creates explanations for things it doesn't understand, and when a Greek artist saw a woman in full battle armor, she became something other, someone who would modify her own body to be a warrior. But the reality was simpler. She wore armor, like male warriors did, and the myth grew from there. Another persistent myth claims that Amazons were an all-female society, that they only encountered men for reproduction, that they killed or sent away male children. Again, there is no archaeological evidence for this. The DNA evidence actually shows something different. Scythian societies included both men and women. Both genders were warriors. Both participated in leadership and society. What likely happened is that the Greeks, encountering a society where women had unprecedented power and autonomy, imagined an even more extreme version, a society with no men at all. It was a fantasy, a projection of what seemed impossible in Greek culture. You see, in Greece, women were largely confined to domestic spaces. They had little power, little autonomy, little say in their own lives. A Greek woman living under these constraints, hearing stories of Scythian warrior women, might have imagined them as completely free, so they didn't need men at all. But the Scythian reality was more nuanced. Women had power and autonomy and relationships with men. It was a partnership, not a separation. The discovery that changed everything occurred in 2019, though the tomb had been found years earlier. In 1988, a tomb was discovered in the Sarıkbulun region of central Tuva. Inside, archaeologists found the mummified remains of a young warrior, remarkably well preserved by the region's permafrost. For decades, this warrior was believed to be male. The assumption was made without evidence, because archaeologists assumed warriors were men. But in recent years, advanced DNA analysis revealed the truth. The 2,600-year-old remains belonged to a 13-year-old girl, a 13-year-old girl who was buried with full warrior honors, with weapons, with armor, with respect. When we extracted the DNA from the remains, the result was indisputable, female, and the age at death was approximately 13. What this tells us is that Scythian societies valued warrior training so highly that they began training girls at childhood. By age 13, this girl was important enough to be buried with full warrior honors. But the most significant discovery came in 2019. Archaeologists excavating a 4th century BC mound in western Russia found 4 female skeletons buried together. And these 4 were not random. They were family. 3 generations, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, along with one other female warrior, likely a close family member. DNA analysis proved the family connection, and what made this discovery truly remarkable was that all 4 were buried with weapons. All 4 were buried with armor. All 4 were buried with the honors reserved for warriors and leaders. The artifacts tell a story of not just warriors, but elite warriors, the quality of the weapons, the richness of the burial goods, the prominence of the tomb itself, all indicate these were among the most respected members of their society. Analysis of the skeletal remains showed something else: evidence of actual combat, healed fractures, old wounds. One warrior showed a healed arrow wound to the pelvis, a wound that would have been life-threatening. She survived it. She continued fighting. This is not ceremonial. This is real. When you see these artifacts, when you understand the care taken in their burial, when you see the evidence of actual combat on their bones, you realize you're not looking at myth. You're looking at history, real women, real warriors, real lives. The discovery of the Scythian warrior women matters for more than just historical accuracy. It challenges our understanding of human potential and human culture. For centuries, Western civilization has operated under the assumption that women are naturally domestic, that men are naturally warriors, that this is the natural order. But the Scythians proved something different. It is culture, not nature, that determines roles. The Scythian societies, by creating a culture that valued women as warriors and leaders, unlocked abilities and potential that other societies kept locked away. They did not do this through ideology or feminist theory. They did it through practical necessity and wisdom. A nomadic society needs everyone to be strong. A society at constant threat from enemies needs every able-bodied person to be armed and trained. And a society that values such warriors discovers that half its population can be just as skilled, just as brave, just as effective as the other half. The myth of the Amazons has endured for thousands of years because it speaks to something deep in the human imagination: the desire to see women as powerful, the understanding that women can be fierce, the recognition that femininity and strength are not mutually exclusive. And now we know the myth was rooted in truth. The legends were inspired by reality. The Amazons were real. The Scythian warrior women are no longer lost to history. They are no longer relegated to myth and legend. We have found them. We have studied them. We understand them. And they demand that we revise our understanding of what human beings are capable of. Every time I hold one of these weapons, I think about the woman who wielded it. I think about her courage, her training, her choices. I think about a life lived fully, as a warrior, as a leader, as a person. And I realize we have been telling the wrong story about our own history. The Amazons weren't a myth. They were real. And their story is our story, a story of human potential unleashed, of cultures creating space for excellence in all people, regardless of gender. That is the legacy of the Scythian warrior women. The mystery of the Amazons is solved, not through ancient texts or Greek myths, but through the testimony of bone and artifact, through DNA analysis and careful archaeological work, through the determination of researchers who dared to question assumptions. The Scythian warrior women walked these steps 2,500 years ago. They lived, they fought, they led, they died, and they left behind evidence that their story would not be forgotten. Their names are lost, their individual stories are fragments, but their legacy is immortal. They proved that when culture opens the door to possibility, human beings of all kinds can achieve extraordinary things. This is the story of the Amazons, a tale woven from myth and reality, a story buried in the earth for thousands of years, a story finally told. If you've enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of the past, if you've been captivated by the real story of the Amazons, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us reach others who love history. Help us continue uncovering the stories that shaped our world, because history is not just what we find in books. It's what we unearth from the earth. It's what DNA tells us. It's what artifacts whisper across the centuries. And sometimes, the greatest discoveries are waiting for those brave enough to question the myths we've been told.